Okay, welcome back. Thank you for bearing with us. We're going to do a bit of juggling around in the back end, but while we're doing that, I'm going to leap ahead slightly in our agenda to open up now to our panel of SMLL build partners. I've got Trevor Dawling with me from DG Cities, and we've got the rest of our build partners dialing in remotely. There we go. I can see people putting their videos on now. Brilliant. Thank you. Welcome, everybody. So this is an opportunity for you at home to get involved as well. So as we are going through this discussion, if there are specific questions that you'd like to pose to one or all of our panelists, if you look on your screen, you can see the chat button, which is a couple of little speech bubbles. Click on that, type your question in, and we'll pose them to our panelists at the end of our discussion. So first off, I'm going to introduce you to all of them so you can hear who we've got here with us today and what their roles in the SMLL build was. And Trevor, I'm going to come to you first, which will sit next to me.
Good afternoon. I'm Trevor Dawling, Managing Director of DG Cities, which is an urban innovation company set up by Greenwich Council back in 2015 to help cities adopt technology to bring about improvements in their cities. And in this particular project in SMLL, we've been involved from the outset. So we're involved in the original concept, making the case to government and helping bring on some of the partners. And more tangibly, during the build phase, that we've overseen the identification of properties, the specification for each property, and also the specification for the infrastructure that's been required to support the technology that you've seen profiled today.
Thank you, Trevor. And Ruth, I'm going to come to you next, please.
Hi, thanks, Vicky. Yes, I'm Ruth Welsh. I'm a member of the Transport Safety Research Centre here at Loughborough University. And the university has been the academic lead during the development of the Smart Mobility Living Lab. And in order to support the human factors issues related with CAM development, we've established a human factors research lab located at Loughborough, which forms part of the SMLL offering.
Thank you. And Michael, your turn.
Hi, I'm Michael Hurwitz. I'm Director of Transport Innovation at Transport for London. We're the integrated authority in London. And our goal is to make sure that we have an inclusive, a safe and environmentally friendly transport system that works. So we've been involved in the build in terms of helping to manage the network, the infrastructure out on the streets. But fundamentally, we want to make sure that all the exciting developments that happen here are consistent with what we want for London, which is an active city, a healthy city, and an inclusive city.
Thank you, Michael. And Victoria, coming to you, please.
Hi, Vicky. Thanks for that. So I'm Victoria Thorns, Sustainability Manager at the London Legacy Development Corporation. LLDC is responsible for the long-term planning, maintenance, development, and management of the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park. As such, our role is that we are the host for SML. And so to date, we've been helping to facilitate the establishment and the roadside build at the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park. And going forward, we'll continue to work with SML to make sure that it's a great success, is well used, and delivers all of the aspirations that we've heard so far today, but also that it fits within the wider inclusive innovation district that is emerging at the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park.
Thank you. And Peter, coming to you, please.
Thank you, Vicky. So good afternoon, everybody. Peter Shearman, my name. I'm head of innovation for Cisco in the UK and Ireland. Cisco is a global leader in IT, and our role in the project, we've brought the leading edge roadside technology and infrastructure and all the back end software and systems and so on in order to create this world leading infrastructure. And we're here and we're committed because we believe that the future of mobility is connected and is driven by the development in technology, and we're here to play our part.
Thank you. And last but not least, Richard.
Thank you very much, and good afternoon, everyone. My name is Richard Kewerden. I'm a director at the UK's Transport Research Laboratory, or TRL. And as you heard from Paul earlier, TRL had the vision to conceive and create London's Smart Mobility Living Lab and has led the design. And it's been an absolute pleasure to work with all of our partners and stakeholders. And I think Paul mentioned it, there must be hundreds of people who've been part of this process. So it does feel like a real achievement to be sat here today talking about it. Thank you.
Thank you. Right, so let's kick off. And Richard, I'm going to come to you with the first question, which is why London? Why here for building Smart Mobility Living Lab?
Golly, why London? That's a great question. Well, when setting out to build a testbed, we knew that London was going to be a major asset. It's a global centre of innovation. It's Europe's only megacity. It's one of the world's leading smart cities. And it's one of the few places in the world where it's possible to test in such very condition. And sort of on top of that, London is a global centre for a range of industries and sectors: finance, insurance, media, gaming, creative industries, and many more. And as we just heard from Michael, London benefits from really having the world-leading innovative mass transport system operator, Transport for London. So if you bring all of these things together, placing SMLL in the heart of such a varied and expansive expertise, we can draw on these sectors to support the development of and investment in, which is crucial, new mobility services. And they in turn can benefit from the new insights into mobility and the way the sector is changing and the impact these changes are going to have. And the line we've used a few times, or I've used a few times, so I can't help but use it again, is that if it works in London, it'll work anywhere.
Thank you, Richard. And Peter, from your perspective and the Cisco perspective, how important was that London element for it in terms of the benefit that offered to the UK as a whole?
Absolutely. Well, I mean, we're very fortunate as Cisco UK to have a very strong country digitalisation acceleration program here. So it's a CDA for short, which allows us to make investments into future digital growth and to push digital out across the UK. And SMLL has been one of the flagships of that. And London is as a mega hub allows us the access to the skills and talent and allows us to and brings together a lot of the key Cisco areas, if you like. But also it's a local story as well. And actually, if you trace back the roots of CDA and the innovation for Cisco in the UK, you come back to 2012 and the London Olympics. And Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park and our sponsorship and our investment there and our innovation presence. So actually, the area has been a part of kind of the innovation lifeblood for Cisco for nearly a decade now, and it brings together all the ingredients that you need, we think, to make a successful testbed.
Brilliant, thank you. And I suppose that then leads us into kind of the next question, which I'm going to pose to you first, Trevor, and then to you, Victoria, which is, okay, we've discussed why London, but why then the Royal Borough of Greenwich and the Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park? So, Trevor, I'm going to come to you first of all to provide the Royal Borough of Greenwich view on that, please.
Well, interestingly, I think there's these sort of characteristics which were very much in the favour of both locations. I mean, we needed a strategic location within London, and both QEOP and the Royal Borough of Greenwich offer that. We needed good transport links, and certainly we get that with both locations. But there's been a big emphasis on a real-world testbed, and we really did need a real-world and varied environment, and both Greenwich and QEOP offer that. They offer this sort of blend between the very established communities with very complex challenges in our transport, very real problems that we face: congestion, air quality, a real ambition to turn those things around, and also new areas. So here in Greenwich, there's massive regeneration programs, big increase in households, big increase in population. And really, we need to plan those areas for the future, and we need to be taking into account what the future will look like, how technology will change things, how connected and autonomous mobility will change things. And both those locations, QEOP and Greenwich, offer that complex but varied environment and an ideal environment to sort of test out solutions.
Brilliant, thank you. And then Victoria, I'm going to come to you if there's anything further you want to add on the kind of Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park specifically.
Yeah, thanks, Vicky. And I suppose just building on what Trevor's just been saying, the two sites offer collectively a range of different features, and those features and challenges that we as users of a city face every day, whether you're a pedestrian or a road user. And I think that's what makes the two sites really exciting for SML, because they offer distinct, but then that kind of complementary environment for testing. And particularly in terms of the park, as Trevor's acknowledged, it is a much newer road layout. Bits of it were built either for the games, or we've been developing now as the park emerges into this sort of the next stage of its development, with new housing, the culture and education district coming through with East Bank and those universities. But therefore, so what clients or users of SML also are getting access to, as well as that physical infrastructure of the roads, is also kind of LLDC's commitment to this whole agenda, and wanting to work with SML and others to understand, how do these mobility solutions get integrated into this new and emerging city we're creating? How do these solutions lead to kind of inclusive and sustainable growth and good growth in London? But therefore, how do they deliver benefits to residents? How do we ensure that there's access for all? How do they benefit our visitors to the park and also local businesses? And as Trevor sort of talks about, how do they help us tackle these key challenges we're facing with air quality, congestion, and climate change? And I think most importantly, how does this all fit? And I know Michael will touch on this later, but with the Mayor's transport strategy, and not pushing us down a route where we all get in a vehicle rather than being able to walk and cycle and use our active thing. But I think, so what collectively we get is this really dense, real-world urban testbed, which hopefully when we can see the video, it will start to come to life as well for people. But it then gives this really rich proving ground for CAM, that I think what SML will help deliver is that really kind of tested, methodical, evidence base that actually this is something that can be out in the real world and start to exist on its own, which is what's really exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. And both of you touched there on kind of local communities and how pivotal those are. Richard, I'm going to come to you again now in terms of how you see or anticipate SMLL interacting with those local facilities now, local communities, sorry, now that those facilities are up and running.
Thanks, Vicky. It's really interesting hearing Trevor and Victoria speak, because they're absolutely right, because SML has to be part of the local community, and we have to provide benefits to it, be they economic benefits or through putting innovation at the forefront. And putting ourselves at the heart of the community means that we're going to understand actually more about what the problems are, what those challenges are in terms of real world transport needs and the barriers that we're going to see for success. And the community is wide. There's lots of parts to it, and one important part, and it's close to our hearts, is education. So we want to work with local schools, colleges, universities. We want to open up new job opportunities for people in the community itself over time. We really want to drive this thing forward and be a success. So the ultimate aim is to deliver mobility solutions into everyday life that have worked for people within this community, that they're benefiting from, that are safe, that are sustainable, affordable, and a real strong focus all the way through it on that societal benefit. And we only really do that, I believe, if we put the community as a pivotal point of our thinking. So it's really important that's the way we've set up the Living Lab.
Thank you. Now, London, as we've sort of discussed already, is a great example of how transportation can form the backbone of a city. We've seen how communities can flourish and form around the ability to move freely and quickly. So what I'm interested in kind of hearing from the panelists now is how you see our towns and cities adapting and reshaping when AVs are commonplace on the road. And Trevor, I'm going to come to you again, because I know this is something DG Cities spend a lot of time thinking about how this will work.
Yes, and it's an interesting way you phrased the question. So unquestionably, transport influences the way cities developed. It always has, and it always will. But in a way, it's useful to flip that question and not only ask sort of what do cities need to do to adapt to connected and autonomous mobility, but also what do we require from connected and autonomous mobility to deliver the kind of city that we want to see in the future. I think we have a particular vision, but the whole purpose of SMLL is to get the views of people, and not least local communities that will benefit or suffer the consequences of new technology. And that's a key role in my mind for SMLL, is to distill all those different views. And if we do it properly, then we will be helping industry, because we will be helping them adapt their their thinking, adapt their technology to go with the grain of what a future city, a modern city actually needs, rather than the city having to try and fit around what the transport provider or the solution provider is actually offering. So our vision in terms of the kind of challenges that we feel that need to be addressed is, CAM has to support key priorities around the use of public transport, better use of road space, a fairer use of road space, and promoting active travel. And we've seen, most recently with the consequences of COVID, that sort of a beginning of rethinking cities and how they function and how they're designed. And we would wish to put connected and autonomous mobility and generally smart mobility in the mix in terms of how we look at how we can design a better city which is resilient and adapts to the needs of people. So some of the issues that I talked about before, like air quality, congestion, there's increasing density in cities. We need to make much better use of our space and improve road safety. All those are solutions which can help address, but we need to shape that, we need to steer that. And I think that's the really exciting thing about Smart Mobility Living Lab and what the government has kicked off here, is it gives us the forum to have those discussions and influence things for the better of cities generally.
Yes, thank you, Trevor. So sustainability is something I want to come on to next. And during the build, that's something that's been a really big consideration as we've built SMLL. But I'm going to ask you a big question now, which is how much responsibility does the transport sector have to take in dealing with the ongoing climate crisis? And Michael, I'm going to throw that one to you first, please.
Thank you. It's a huge responsibility because it's a huge contributor to pollution. It's a great facilitator for economic activity, for social activity, for inclusion, but that comes at a cost. And people have mentioned already the Mayor's transport strategy, becoming net zero, pushing towards that, driving active travel, driving sustainable modes in an inclusive way, in a safe way, is fundamental to the principles of the Mayor's transport strategy, and that's why we're involved here. Because there's going to be a huge amount of creativity here. It's going to be a huge number of companies putting their best minds to devising new ideas and new solutions. And what we want to make sure is that when that happens, it's consistent with the goals of the transport strategy. And building on what Trevor said, particularly in a post-COVID world, we've got to make sure that we don't lock ourselves into a future that we might not want. We need to make sure it's environmentally friendly, but as much as that, safety. This is a real world environment. That's we've put our own guidance about what we expect from responsible testing companies, how we want them to behave, interact with the communities, be very clear about how they're going to make this safe and an inclusive surface. So we want to see that here, and that's why we're involved, because there's a choice. We can allow technology to happen for technology's sake, but what we would much prefer is technology to develop in a way that actually puts people and the outcomes that benefit those people, inclusivity, safety, really at the heart of what we want to have developed at SMLL.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Michael. And Richard, from your perspective, is this something then that just, one player in the transport ecosystem, or is it everybody's responsibility?
It's absolutely everybody's. And I'm staggered when when I look at the evidence. The transport accounts for 1/3 of all the carbon dioxide emissions in the UK. It became the largest emitting sector of greenhouse gases in 2016. And as other sectors are really, putting in an awful lot of effort and reducing their greenhouse gas emissions, transport's holding pretty static. And the evidence is just overwhelming. We can't deny it anymore. What we're doing is changing our climate, and therefore everyone who works in the transport ecosystem has a responsibility to help in the effort to tackle this current crisis. It just is, in my opinion, and I think everyone else's. So, there've been some green shoots, some hope. In the last 5 years, I think we've seen some changes in consumer behaviour. We've certainly seen a greater take-up of EVs. We're seeing more cycling and walking in some of our towns and cities. Perhaps we're seeing the start of transport as a service model starting to become a commercial reality. But how, let's be realistic. To meet the UK government's targets for net zero greenhouse gas emissions by 2050, that requires a fundamental change in how we move people and goods. And that's only going to be brought about through, as Michael was explaining, sort of system-based, evidence-led approaches where we're going to have to get all the best minds together. And I'm really, really confident that the SMLL team and people in the innovation community and the people who are working with us are best placed to look at that, be that the technological solutions, be it behavioural, be it rethinking our efficiencies or demand of traffic management. All of that's going to be up for grabs. And we're going to have to rethink it, and we're going to have to do so really quickly. We can't wait. This sort of activity has to be happening right now.
Yeah, absolutely. And Peter, I'm going to come to you as sort of representative of tech organisations, so coming at this from another angle. I'm interested in your thoughts about how important it is for Cisco to be involved in something like SMLL to be trying to tackle some of these big societal issues. Yeah,
well, I think we've. Well, first of all, it's essential for us. I mean, we technology has a huge role to play as a way to mitigate and create new models and create new opportunities and ways of doing that can help to alleviate some of that particular challenge. And I think what's really interesting is that crossover and that point between the way that what technology can enable us to do and the way that human behaviour shifts and adapts, and the way that cities moderate and move. And we're in the middle of one of those shifts right now, and so the opportunity for us to be part of how you test and develop and iterate and come up with new models and new approaches and new ways of doing with technology at the heart is really important. We as a UK innovation team have looked at are continuing to look at things like vehicle to grid energy trading, and as a way of helping to mitigate carbon in other realms. And you're going to see that crossover of energy, carbon, mobility, technology playing out in all sorts of different ways, and it's essential for us as a company, indeed as a sector, to show up for that.
Brilliant, thank you. And I'm going to turn our attentions now to safety. Michael's already kind of referenced that in the last answer. That's obviously been a major focus throughout the build, and actually it's I think a real bedrock of everything that we've built here with SMLL. And so I think it'd be interesting if we can delve a little bit more into how that's reflected through SMLL's offerings. And Ruth, I'm going to come to you because you've got a really interesting perspective on this, I think, from the work that you've been doing up in Loughborough.
Yeah, thanks, Vicky. I think it's fair to say that many people still have concerns about safety due to the lack of human interaction that there are with AVs. But it's also equally fair to say that humans will still play a very critical role in the transition to autonomy. And so that's why, in addition to the 2 sites in Greenwich at QAP, and the SMLL has invested in the Human Factors Research Lab here at Loughborough University. And the team here have substantial expertise that will enable testing and research into the many different relationships that the human will have with the autonomous vehicles, and indeed with smart mobility. So, it's our view that automation does not replace human performance, but it is very likely to change the performance, and that will be in ways that we have yet to determine, and some of which could well be safety critical. So we very much feel that by considering and evaluating the human role, it's envisaged that trust and acceptance will be gained from a safety perspective as well as from a user perspective. So that's kind of how we envisage the Human Factors Lab being able to contribute to the safety aspect of SMLL.
Brilliant, thank you, Ruth. And Rich, coming to you again, safety is obviously so fundamental to everything that TRL does. Perhaps you can share a little bit about some of the specifics that have been built into how SMLL will safely operate.
Thank you again. And really just building on what Ruth said, I think everything from that early design stage that Ruth talked about, from really trying to understand what we really mean by safety, what metrics are we going to use to measure these things, what unintended consequences are we going to design out, frankly. There's going to be really important parts of what's done up in Loughborough and up in the research off-road facilities. We want to really understand that before we get on the road. And then when we get on the road with vehicles, we've got to make sure that we provide customers with really easy access to being able to develop their products, but obviously in a safe environment. So what can we do? Well, we can provide developers with insights into the evolving international regulations and risk assessment protocols. And that's really important because we want to help people future-proof their solutions. We've got really good insight into what's happening at an international level, and want to make sure that we keep close with that. We don't want to have the VHS Betamax problems that have occurred in the past, yes. Even in safety, dare I say. We can provide consultancy and support for every aspect of sort of risk management and develop the safety case documentation that's really important, really proving to the communities we mentioned earlier, but to ourselves that what we're doing is absolutely bulletproof in terms of safety, because it's the one thing we will never compromise on. And I guess last, and definitely not least, and again linking to what we can do with the Human Factors Lab and what we can do in the real world environment, we've got a digital twin of the living lab, so we can simulate journeys in virtual models. So building those simulation capabilities so we can really see what will work in a virtual and a physical world. There's things you can do in a virtual world you definitely don't want to do in a physical world, or perhaps you want to do in a virtual world first to build the confidence around, to understand how the systems will perform, to understand testing scenarios that wouldn't be safe to perform in a real world environment. All of that is available through the Human Factors Lab and through SMLL itself. And so we think we offer customers a really rich, easy to test environment, and we're really looking forward to working with people as soon as possible.
Thank you. And then Peter, I'm going to come to you, because obviously from a Cisco perspective, we think about safety from a slightly different angle.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And I think you've got what you are doing when you're introducing this crossover now of technology and mobility, and we've seen it in other sectors, is that you now enter the realm of cybersecurity, and you now enter an entirely different kind of threat environment, if you like, for the sector, and so that needs to be a key part of whatever is coming down the track. And there's been a lot of work done. Indeed, we've put a lot of our security portfolio into the test bed to ensure that we have a secure and safe environment in which to test. But equally, that's now part of the thinking about, okay, well, what do the future road infrastructures need to look like? What is that collaboration in between vehicles and roadside in order to create that safe environment? And that's another dimension that we need to add here on top of, and what could connected autonomous mobility and associated technologies do to improve the overall safety and well-being of passengers and riders and pedestrians and so on. So that's a really important part of the contribution that Cisco's been able to make.
Brilliant, thank you. Now, I promised that I would pose to you all some questions that we've had from our audience, and we have got some meaty ones that have come through. So one of the first questions that we've got here, and Richard, I think I'm probably going to throw this one to you, is how will you test CAVs with pedestrians and cyclists?
That's a great question, and the honest answer is we're not planning on doing that in the live environment to begin with. So we've run trials already. We started with Gateway. We've done our own trials for the shared research program, part of our innovation community, late last year, and we've worked with the wider CAM Testbed UK. So there's off-road tracks we can use where we can test those systems to really make sure the systems are going to work in the off-road environment, and we built up our confidence and built safety cases around understanding who the other road users are going to be and what the risks of interaction with those road users are going to be. So we've got quite well developed protocols for making sure that before we even get to the real world environment, we're really confident these systems are going to work.
Brilliant, thank you. Next question I've got is, do we plan on using 5G and hybrid connectivity? And I'm not sure who I'm going to direct that to first. I don't know, Trevor, I know obviously you did some work on connectivity throughout the build.
Well, I'm happy to have the first go at this. To date, our focus has been on establishing a fibre infrastructure and a lot of the data is being pulled back over that fibre into the data centre. I mean, it is critical that the testbed remains relevant and up to date. So although 5G isn't being used at present, then I can certainly anticipate that it will be used in the future. And we've made that kind of easy to interface with in the way that we've come up with the architecture for the infrastructure.
Brilliant, thank you.
But it depends very much on what the industry partners require.
Need.
But I think I think one can anticipate that 5G will be part of the mix before too long.
Absolutely. The next question is an interesting one. I'm going to actually just open this up to all of you. So by 2030, what proportion of cabs on the road will mean success? Which is a really interesting one for you all.
Can I go at that one?
Please do.
I think it's the wrong question.
I thought you might say that.
Because I think success is that in comparison to where we are now, travel is safer, and if AVs can contribute to that, fantastic. Success by then is pretty much zero, and if cabs can contribute to that, amazing. And so flip it round, and I think that will help us drive the research program here, drive the activities here, because it will make it mission driven in terms of what we want to achieve. So I won't get drawn on that, but I'd much prefer to have the bigger outcomes at what we're trying to achieve, rather than trying shooting for a specific percentage for an arbitrary reason.
Yeah, and I feel like that's probably going to be a view that's shared by the panel. I would imagine. Yeah, lots of nodding heads. Yeah, absolutely. Okay, brilliant. Well, that's a relief. So that leads us actually on to the next question then, which is how will we measure the benefits of SMLL? Who'd like to tackle that one for me?
Go on
then.
Well, I'll start, but please others come and help me. Okay, so when we took, I think, leading from what Michael just said, I think it's really interesting. What the fundamental reason for building SML was to make this difference to society in terms of bringing new mobility that's going to have the societal benefits that we want. Now, SML isn't going to do it all. Absolutely not. We're just one test bed in a much bigger system. But if we are still around in 10 years' time, and if we've been part of that testing and that research and development, and we've contributed that evidence base and helped the people who are coming in from SMEs through to multinational companies get their products and services that are delivering those societal benefits that we all want, that will be success. And how much of that we get to do, who knows? But we're aiming big. We're really going to go for this.
Thank you, Victoria. Yeah.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, from a park perspective and an LDC perspective, I think, benefits are that, as Michael was also saying, this becomes part of a wider mobility offer. The solutions are starting to be embedded, and that there's that level of kind of acceptance, but also what has happened over the sort of 10 years to say 2030, or wherever we end up realising those benefits, is that local community and people have helped influence and shape what is starting to emerge and the solutions that come out. I think what's really interesting as well is how do we get that balance, that what happens with CAM and sort of evolving in all this new technology is not this sense of we need all this technology and the new shiny thing for the sake of it. It's what's the challenge, what's the reason, why are we wanting that to come through, and how does that then translate into kind of tangible benefits, whether that's from air quality, congestion, or access for all in terms of residents not feeling like they need to own a car or a vehicle, but can get access to something through a shared mobility scheme, or sort of the idea of mobility or transport as a service, I think is for our perspective key. And then how does that open up a kind of the city and our area in terms of not needing to have then lots of parking and new road infrastructure? We can rethink how our cities look and feel and kind of take back some of that, the kind of clogged infrastructure.
Thank you. And Trevor, I can see you nodding furiously through that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree with what Victoria's saying there. But I'd also add that kind of locally, and I would say kind of across London and nationally too, that the jobs angle is a really important one. Mm-hmm. So we hope is that we will be creating an ecosystem here where businesses can work alongside SMLL, and not necessarily sort of the businesses that you would automatically imagine, not necessarily all sort of transport-related companies, but a whole host of supplementary businesses can work alongside and create jobs, and that we can help the government fulfil its ambition to make CAV and CAM a leading industry for the UK and indeed a world beater. So I think success will mean different things for different people. Certainly we have those very high ambitions around around how transport changes, how mobility changes, how cities can kind of learn and gain insights, how we can drive the national economy in this sector, but also how we can make a real difference locally as well. Thank you.
Peter, yeah, come to you.
If I may just, I think I was going to echo Trevor's point about the non-typical collaborations. I think that's what's really interesting about this space, and indeed that's where you see a lot of progress being made when actually we can get that collaboration going across sectors and across industries, and CAV and CAM, it's at that point of intersection between a lot of different sectors coming together, and so actually from our perspective, being able to be part of that ecosystem, working with those that you wouldn't otherwise have that opportunity to, that's where we're going to see a lot of that creativity coming through, a lot of new ideas coming through, and I think that SMLL is extremely well placed to bring together those disparate actors that wouldn't otherwise be a part of something together, and be able to catalyse that collaboration. I think that's critical.
Brilliant, thank you. And then the final question is one that I can tackle myself, I'm pleased to say, which is how can we get in touch? So the best way to do that is to visit our website, which is smartmobility.london, or you can get in touch via Twitter. We are at SMLL_London. Panelists, thank you so much for joining us and sharing those insights and experiences. I hope everyone at home has found that a really interesting discussion. Thank you.